This episode is brought to you by VPP Simplified. Now you can get element by element tracking and guidance for your VPP journey. Every aspect of the VPP requirements in one easy-to-use interactive spreadsheet. It explains every sub-element in detail, contains an easy-to-read stoplight so you can track current status for each sub-element. It provides you with a 3-step verification for completion of each sub-element. There's even a notes section for you to compile language that will eventually be used for your VPP application. It even comes complete with graphs to show current state and track your progress moving forward. Look, achieving VPP star status can be tough, but understanding what it takes to get there can be simplified. This VPP Gap tool will help you do that. Go to vppsimplified.com for more information.
Welcome to the Safety Pro Podcast, where we help you manage workplace safety one episode at a time. And now, your very own Safety Pro, Blaine J. Hoffman.
All right, getting ready for another episode of the Safety Pro Podcast. We are going to tackle corrosives today. We're going to touch on just what are corrosives, why are they hazardous, and what we need to do to protect ourselves in the workplace. We all know exposure to corrosive chemicals are more common than most people think. We see them in the workplace all the time, but you know what? They're in the home as well, an awful lot. They come in the form of liquids, powders, even pellets, gases. They have a very strong, irritating odor. However, this isn't always the case. So it's important for employees to always read warning labels on containers, understand the safety data sheets, and be able to identify the substances they'll be working with, as well as their associated hazards. But before we jump into today's topic, I want to pause and take a moment to talk about the official floor marking and floor sign company of the Safety Pro Podcast, Mighty Line Floor Tape. They know how important safety is to your organization, and the breadth of the Mighty Line product line covers everything you need to implement a 5S system for increased productivity at your facility and increased safety for your workers. Mighty Line 5S floor markings are a great way to stay organized. And as we're going to get into in today's topic, it's a great way to also indicate the location of emergency eyewash stations and emergency showers. They have angles, dots, arrows to indicate traffic flow. Those are just a few of the 5S markings they offer. Listen to some of these facts. Mighty Line floor tape is 7 times thicker than the average floor tape. Their patented technology makes it more durable than other floor tapes. The beveled edge increases durability for forklift traffic. The peel and stick adhesive removes easily. And of course, best of all, it's all made here in the USA. Go to mightylinetape.com/podcast to get a free sample of their incredible floor tape sent directly to you. Again, mightylinetape.com/podcast. Okay, getting back into corrosives. What are they exactly? Now, obviously, they have the power to gradually weaken and even destroy objects like metal, especially metal, and other materials through basically chemical reactions. Physical exposure can have powerful effects since corrosives can cause immediate and permanent damage, especially if they touch your skin, your eyes, the respiratory tract, even the digestive tract. So corrosives are one of two things, right? They're acids or bases, and they are chemically reactive in nature. This is why people feel that burning sensation on their skin or eyes or throat when they make contact. One thing to keep in mind is that the stronger the corrosive is and the longer it remains in contact with your body, the worse the injuries could be. So let's break down the two categories, right? Acids. Well, some common acids you may run into in the workplace are sulfuric acid, contained in batteries, drain openers, even corrosion-removing material. So folks that work in restoration services, construction, maintenance facilities, those types of workers may run into products that contain sulfuric acid. Acetic acid is also very common. Adhesive sealants, window and floor cleaners all could contain acetic acids. Hydrochloric acid is often found in toilet bowl cleaners, grout cleaners, as well as rust and stain removers. Nitric acid, That can be found in dishwashing liquid gel, fertilizers, dyes, even some pharmaceuticals, as well as in the production of semiconductors, electroplating, etching, and the cleaning of many different types of metals. Chromic acid, obviously, found in chrome plating. You're going to find it in those operations. And hydrofluoric acid is contained in the manufacture of refrigerants, herbicides, pharmaceuticals, high-octane gasolines, so petrochemical, aluminum, plastics, electrical components, even fluorescent light bulb processing could contain HF or hydrofluoric acid. Some common bases include ammonium hydroxide, which can be found in ammonia products. Potassium hydroxide could be contained in antifreeze or coolants, drain openers, wax strippers, fertilizers, and any number of a variety of household cleaners. Sodium hydroxide contained in household cleaners as well. Calcium hydroxide could be in any kind of surface bonding cement, stucco, hydrated lime, things like that. And sodium carbonate contained in laundry detergent, even all-purpose cleaners, and mildew and stain removers. So the health hazards of corrosives that are used in the workplace, you're going to find that information in the product's safety data sheet. But here's some common hazards that they may all include. Obviously, burns, chemical burns, the skin and the mucous membranes of the eyes, the nose, the mouth, respiratory tract, they're all targets for irritation and burning from contact with these corrosives. There could be varying respiratory ailments. So as the mucous membrane linings of the nose, the throat, even the respiratory tract, when they're irritated or burned from corrosive gases, fumes, or even mists, the body produces fluids to try to protect the tissue. This can lead to a buildup of fluid in the lungs, known as pulmonary edema. That could be a life-threatening condition. And obviously poisoning. Many corrosives are toxic, and when they get into your system through inhalation, even absorption through the skin or ingestion, the overexposure to these toxics or highly toxic corrosives that could require medical attention. They could also lead to a life-threatening condition. So poisoning is something to be taken very seriously. The physical properties of corrosives can cause them to be reactive, highly reactive. They react with many other materials, and some of them can be violent, generate intense heat, even cause explosions, or enough pressure buildup in a container to make it rupture. Many corrosives are reactive with just water even. They could become combustible or flammable, so that's an issue you have to be concerned with in the workplace. They can easily ignite, and acetic acid is one example. And when they react with other metals, explosive and highly flammable hydrogen could be produced. So this is a big deal as well. Some of them are even oxidizing. So when oxidizers are involved in a chemical reaction, obviously oxygen's released. So this can increase the flammability hazard. So oxidizers initiate or promote combustion in other materials. So that's the byproduct that we're talking about. Nitric, chromic, those acids are examples of corrosives that are also oxidizers. How do we protect our employees? Obviously, eliminating the use of some of these materials would be ideal, right? If you can find a less hazardous substitute for a chemical, that's always going to be your best bet. But if you do have to use these materials, then engineering controls would be your first line of defense. So ventilation is one type of engineering control that is commonly used to protect employees from the overexposure to corrosives. Automated chemical transfer equipment is another type to eliminate people from manually having to transfer chemicals from one vessel to another, one container to another, things like that. When you eliminate the human element from any kind of manual handling of this material, then that's an engineering control you want to consider. Then, of course, we go to your last line of defense, personal protective equipment, like goggles, face shields, gloves, coveralls, aprons. The thing to consider is if you've got somebody with a face shield and it's not rated for wet location, you're going to have wet application goggles underneath the face shield as well. You have to double that protection up. You can't just have somebody in safety glasses and then throw on a garden variety face shield. It has to be rated for the type of work that you're doing. Shoe covers are often overlooked as well. You can have somebody in a face shield, goggles, an apron, gloves going up to the elbows, and they're in there with regular work boots, leather work boots, or even low-top work shoes, safety shoes. If you spill anything on your feet, the material could get into the laces, past the tongue, and into your foot, soaking up into your sock, and then you have material against your skin for an extended period of time. You always want to consider shoe coverings in certain work processes, just something to think about. Now, safe work practices are obviously important as well. Several work practices can help minimize the risk of when employees are having to work with corrosives. These include taking appropriate fire prevention precautions. Make sure employees understand what to do if a violent chemical reaction occurs, what emergency steps they have to take, the location of emergency equipment. They'll also need to remove combustible materials, ignition sources, etc. from the storage areas. One big one is a flammable cabinet or even corrosives cabinet. You open it up and there is a lot of combustible material in there. They have a box of that comes in from shipping, and it contains canisters of flammable material that have to go into the flammable cabinet or the corrosive cabinet. You have to take those box out of the equation. That becomes basically combustible material. It could soak up fluids and hold on to those fluids, and if there's a spark introduced, it would just continue to burn. So you want to make sure that all combustible material are removed from flammable or corrosive cabinets. Remove all jewelry prior to working with corrosives. One, there's a chemical reaction that could take place with certain metals, but two, you get a little bit of material under a ring, and it's basically going to stay under there against your finger, your hand, or a watch band, things like that. Always remove jewelry, and make sure that you are mindful that jewelry can also puncture a lot of gloves that you put on as well. So make sure you take those off. Lastly, only use the amount of corrosive material you need for the job. If you're going to be doing like a floor stripping operation, make sure you only use, you could have a 55-gallon drum sitting there that you just, dump out onto the floor and strip the floor. Or you can have a small pail that you use for one section of the floor at a time. You kick that over, you only have a little bit spilled versus 55-gallon drum. Safe storage procedures. You're going to base this on the product's safety data sheet, but it could include storing corrosives in their original containers in a well-ventilated area. And, of course, you're going to need to inspect containers for damage prior to use or periodically when you have them stored. Cleanup and disposal procedures have to be covered as well. What do you expect employees to do if you spill or dump some of this material? And how do we dispose of it when we're done using it or working with the material? And lastly, you're going to want to cover first aid and emergency procedures. When workers are overexposed to corrosive gases, vapors, fumes, or mists, they have to be removed to an area with fresh air, and they may need medical attention. Do your employees know how to notify emergency services? Do they understand where emergency services are located if they're working on a project site, remote site, or if you have visitors in doing work? If you're at a manufacturing facility and you have contractors coming in, are they local? Do they understand where emergency services are located outside of the facility? So you're going to want to cover all that good stuff. Lastly, I want to touch on the most common first aid medical procedure used in an exposure to corrosive material, and that is, of course, flushing the affected area with clean water for at least a minimum of 15 minutes. That's just, you don't stop after 15 minutes. You have to do it for at least 15 minutes. Now, that's going to get us into emergency eyewash and showers, and I want to talk a little bit about what's required with eyewash and showers. Let's talk about when they're actually required. So you're going to find this in the OSHA 29 CFR 1910.151C. And that states where the eyes or body of any person may be exposed to injurious corrosive materials, suitable facilities for quick drenching or flushing of the eyes and body shall be provided within the work area for immediate emergency use. I emphasized a few words there, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. Basically, you have to determine if employees can or will be exposed during the course of their duties to hazardous materials in such a way that the protections of an eyewash or emergency shower would be needed. Let's put it another way. If hazardous materials are present at a work site in a manner that exposure could not occur within reason, for example, they're in sealed containers and they will not be opened, or caustic materials are contained in building piping and there is no spigot, I'll talk about that in a second, or discharge point, then you would not need to provide an eyewash or shower. So a warehouse that gets some materials on a pallet that's wrapped up and sealed in containers, and they're not going to be opened and they're just there and they're going to be picked up for delivery and shipped somewhere else, that you wouldn't necessarily need to provide emergency eyewash and showers. Is it a good idea? Well, heck yeah. You could have a forklift run into a pallet, back into a pallet, a fork penetrate a drum, and you could have this material start to spill or even get on somebody. So it's a good idea, but we're talking about minimum standards, right? A starting point for us here. So getting back to like a spigot on building piping, for example, if your building piping has at certain locations a tap from which those contents are to be sampled or withdrawn by employees, then you have to have an eyewash or shower at that location where the task is to occur. So that notwithstanding, if you have sealed containers, they're not intended to be opened, they're in, or caustic materials are in building piping throughout the facility, in general, you wouldn't need to provide one. Other than that, I'm going to go back to the original statement. You have to determine if employees can or will be exposed during the course of their duties to hazardous materials. And that's going to drive the need for an emergency eyewash or shower. So here's what you're going to ask. Are corrosive materials present on the site? And your SDS is going to tell you whether they are or not. Yes or no. And are employees or could employees be exposed? That is, they're going to be working with this material outside of their containers. If you answer yes, then an emergency eyewash or shower is needed. Now let's talk about the two different units, an eyewash and a shower. Whether an emergency shower is needed in addition to the eyewash is dependent on several factors. Obviously you're going to start with the SDS. If it says an eyewash and shower is needed, you have to provide one. What does it say about eye versus body injury? Some of these materials are so weak and diluted that when they get on the skin, the SDS is telling you that, it's not really an immediate hazard, but in the eyes, it is a hazard. So that's going to drive whether or not you need an eye wash only or an eye wash and a shower. The other thing, what you have to ask, what's the possibility that the chemical could splash or spill onto the body versus just the eyes, and how much of the chemical are employees being exposed to? Ultimately, OSHA expects you, the employer, to determine the level of potential risk to the employees and to provide the right protection. I often see this one with portable units, the eyewash units. So you'll see the big green jug on a stand with the eyewash, and there's an employee sitting at a table working with some material, and the SDS clearly says, don't get it on your skin, must flush immediately upon contact. What do you do if the employee has this little amount, this little cup of this material, and they're using it with their gloves and they're using a rag? There's really no opportunity to splash this onto your face. The real hazard is with their elbow, or they knock over this cup and it spills onto their lap. That's really the hazard. So now you've got this eyewash station here, this portable eyewash, and there's no real effective means for the employee to wash their body. So you may need to do an assessment of your facility to determine whether or not you need to change those out, to get the wand that you can grab and also use on the body, or just leave in place and put your face down into it and pull the release on these portable units. There are options you can get to be able to do both, wash parts of the body off as well as the face and eyes. So where do we locate these? Well, as close to the task as possible, but no more than 10 seconds of walking distance away from the task. Okay? It has to be within 10 seconds walking distance. It also has to be on the same level, platform, deck, whatever, that the task is being performed. It has to be an unobstructed path of travel. You can't have to go through a door to get to it. You can't have to climb up or down stairs or a ladder. It has to be on the same level, unobstructed, and it's got to be in a safe location. Now, OSHA does not prescribe eyewash or shower inspections, but ANSI does. OSHA is going to refer to ANSI as well as the manufacturer of this equipment. So ANSI says that all eyewash and shower units have to be inspected and maintained in accordance with manufacturer's instructions. And in the absence of such instructions, ANSI says self-contained units should be visually inspected weekly to determine if the fluid needs to be changed or more fluid added. And for plumbed units, they should be tested weekly. And they also say that components of the combination units must operate individually and simultaneously. So activating the shower and eyewash for a combo unit or just doing one or the other, you have to have those options. You have to run the units for at least 3 minutes to reduce microbial contamination. So a weekly flow test is also suggested under the ANSI standards. Also, there are no record-keeping requirements with regard to eyewash and shower inspections. It would depend on the employer to sort of establish a best practice on how to document this, because you got to make sure it's getting done. When you go through your manufacturing facility, you got to make sure that you're doing your flow test on these eyewash and stations and these showers. Obviously, you don't do a flow test on portable units. You would just do the visual inspection because the manufacturer provides guidance on how to inspect them. But the plumbed units that you buy and you have your maintenance department run those and plumb them, those do have to be inspected weekly and do a flow test as well. ANSI also has an annual inspection that is needed. Okay, so eyewashes have to be able to deliver 0.4 gallons of fluid per minute for 15 minutes, and the showers a minimum of 20 gallons of flushing fluid per minute for 15 minutes. ANSI also requires that you maintain a temperature range for these units, and that is between 60 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So you want to do your test during the cold months if you're in an area of the country where you're going to be subject to those types of weather conditions. You're going to want to test in those conditions, as well as the hottest months. You're going to want to make sure that where you have these located in the piping and the plumbing, going through certain processes, are certain areas of your manufacturing plant that contain hot or cold processes. You're going to want to make sure it doesn't impact the piping, the water pipes, going into the emergency eyewashes and showers. You want to make sure you can maintain that range of 60 to 100 degrees. Well, there you have it. It was a quick one, but I wanted to tackle corrosives, give you something to start with, and to go into your facilities or around your projects and start looking for this material. Refer to the safety data sheet. Make sure employees understand the hazards of working with corrosives. Make sure they understand and are knowledgeable on the response procedures to exposure and how to notify medical services. Make sure they understand and can locate the medical equipment or the emergency eyewash and shower stations throughout your facility or your projects. Make sure that they're being tested weekly and you can maintain them going forward. Look, it's real simple to manage this stuff, but in my experience in the past, I have seen where some of these have gone horribly wrong. You see the eyewash stations that are plumbed and have the bowl, there's a bar of soap in it and people are using it to wash their hands, or you could see like an 1/8 of an inch of dust in these bowls, so it wasn't flow tested recently, or they when they do finally flow test them, it's just brown water coming out of it. Make sure that you're running these lines weekly to make sure that you get good clean water flushed out of those through those systems. And look, make sure everybody is aware of why they're there, the importance and why they're needed, and that's really going to help keep everybody safe. So shoot me an email. The link is in the show notes. I want to hear your feedback on corrosives and what best practices maybe you have in your facilities or your project sites. I'd love to share those on the podcast with the listeners. Again, go to mightylinetape.com/podcast. Grab a free sample of their floor tape. Get started marking the location of some of this emergency equipment and these, emergency eyewashes and stations. Make sure you're able to mark those. I think you're going to enjoy their product. Again, mightylinetape.com podcast. And until the next podcast episode, be safe.